Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Virginia SBDC's webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's webinar is photo blogs, blogs, and podcasts. Well, that's a mouthful. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, web and mobile strategist, author of So Low Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting, a digital business strategy and training firm. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window, and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. As Tracy said, today we're going to be talking about podcasting, blogging, and photo blogging, basically the multimedia marketing for small business concept. And so just a couple housekeeping items here. One is that, this is here for you to ask questions, so by all means, make this interactive if you need it to be. So ask questions, and Tracy will, catch me in a breath and make sure that I answer the questions that you might have here regarding multimedia marketing today. If you have any questions after the webinar, the archives will be posted on the virginiaSBDC.org website under live recordings, trainings and recordings or something like that. And you can go ahead and just at W3 Consulting on Twitter, hashtag it Beyond Google, and I'll be able to answer those questions as well. And of course, follow at Virginia SBDC on Twitter to learn about future programs and other programs that the SBDC is providing out there for you. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. First and foremost, we'll be talking about the importance of the multimedia and the multi-channel strategy for small business, and we're going to spend some time talking about that. I think a lot of people don't really understand what the two concepts are. We're going to sort of hopefully shed some light on that topic. The next thing we're going to talk about today is really what these particular types of multimedia are and the available channels to basically blog. And so we'll talk about audio, video, and photographic content and really what it means for small business. And then I'm going to talk about just how to get started, dipping your toe in the water with each of these and talking about some of the networks you might want to sort of dip your toe into. It's a very complex, sort of concept, but you don't have to make it overwhelming as you get yourself started. You learn as you go. So we're going to talk about some of the ways in which you can sort of dip your foot in the water and really get started there. Okay, so that's the agenda for today. We're going to work our way through, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So feel free to ask questions throughout or prepare to ask those at the end as well. Okay, so multimedia, multi-channel marketing. Really, what is multimedia, multi-channel marketing? It's a very, very big topic, and what I want to do is just condense that into something in sort of bite-sized nuggets for us here today. So the things that we know about multimedia, multi-channel marketing is that it is a sort of primarily new media, and the way I talk about new media is that it's not traditional media. That is, it's not print, telemarketing, direct mail, terrestrial radio, television, those kinds of things that we typically think of as traditional media. Okay, so if it's not one of those things, if it's not a printed piece of collateral that you receive in the mail, if it's not a print brochure, if it's not a telemarketing call, it's most likely new media, which means that multi-channel marketing tries to use multimedia, that is new media, to approach the small business in many different ways, okay? And the really cool part here is that there's this sort of media convergence component, right? Which is that we're using SMS, web, email, and even location-based or GPS-based technologies, okay? So multimedia and multi-channel means that we're trying to combine those. A lot of people call them integrative marketing, and they come up with all kinds of different terms. But really, what I mean by multimedia is that we're using audio, video, or other kinds of mechanisms within a new media perspective, meaning that they're primarily on the web in some way, shape, or form, or on a mobile device, and you're receiving those through a desktop or web interface. Okay, so it might be your mobile phone, it might be a tablet, it might be a laptop. It doesn't really matter, but this is all sort of digital content in a way. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about the reality factor here, which is a lot of people say, well, Ray, I don't have the time, or I don't have the budget, or I don't have the X. All right. Well, you have to start thinking about this from a more, sort of an abundance reality approach, okay, which is that there is so much free and low-cost content created out there that is of superior quality, okay? And these are being done by the users, the consumers of a lot of this content, okay? That means that these people are not business owners, all right? They're out there creating content out of the joy and passion for the subject in which they're talking about. And sometimes the joy and passion in which these people are talking about is themselves. And so we have to sort of, extract them necessarily from the situation. However, it's really important to understand that, we have a lot of YouTubers out there now who make that is their life, that's their living, that's all they do. They're YouTubers. That's the profession they put in their little category box, probably on their IRS forms. But the reality is that, these people are creating this, and they're using free and low-cost technologies and using free and low-cost platforms, channels, in order to be able to get that content out to people. You should be doing the same thing. You should be there in those environments and promoting your business, okay? And engaging the other multimedia, multi-channel content creators in the process. And we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, okay? So the reality factor is really important for us to really understand. This is being done, and it's being done by not only people who are consuming, but also major corporate and so on and so forth. You need to fill in that gap and be there for your customers, because that's how you're going to stay top of mind. That's how you're going to be able to build integrative marketing campaigns that are going to draw them closer into your website and onto your email lists, and be able to sell more product, sell more service, okay? Next up is that there are several benefits for being able to really engage in a multimedia, multi-channel marketing schema, okay? And so what we've learned from a lot of the statistics that are out there, I'm looking at sort of statistics up and through the end of 2014 right now that we have, and what we're seeing is that we have such a broader reach when we use this kind of multi-channel marketing using multimedia, okay? We're seeing that we're capable of getting out to more people because, you have a particular audience who may only listen to podcasts. You might have only, which are buyers of yours, but they only listen to podcasts. Like a lot of the people that I interact with, I'm a Twitter person. I primarily receive a lot of my content through Twitter as well. You might have people who are really only email-based and they're not on social media. Well, by engaging in that multi-channel perspective and in a multimedia way, getting the audio or video or photographic content out to them in that way, in each of those particular channels, you've got a much broader reach, right? Because if I don't listen to and subscribe to podcasts, then I'll never hear about you if you don't podcast, right? And likewise with Twitter, and likewise with getting me signed up on your email list. You need to be able to broaden that reach by being able to interact and engage in those different mediums. Finally, or next, is the reality of being able to get more feedback, which is that social media, social technologies, by their nature, allow us to be able to receive content, that content, one of them being feedback, constructive, hopefully, feedback from our potential customers, our past customers, and obviously our current. So we want to be able to engage, and we get that through multi-channel marketing quite more. We're seeing that the statistics are really an increase, exponential increase, when we look at the number of people who are giving feedback in these multi-channel marketing campaigns than when we just use one. When we're just interacting in one versus getting them across the board. It's just sort of a multiplication issue. Next up is increased sales, right? And that speaks to everybody. If you're going to get more sales if you have, a broader marketing reach. And so we're seeing the businesses who do multi-channel marketing, they're having market increases in sales over businesses who are saying that they're using solo channel marketing or single channel marketing, where they're only doing and incorporating their campaigns into one particular channel. So that definitely is something that we should pay attention to. And finally, we get a greater understanding of our customers when we engage in multi-channel marketing. The reason for that is that, again, the same thing about what I talked about regarding broader reach and more feedback. It's the fact that, if you engage and interact with someone who's a podcast listener, you're talking about a different demographic, they're affluent, income, consumers. They are highly engaged and they're very apt to socially share. Well, that's very different than the people who are receiving email and they're basically a passive recipient of content. They're very unlikely to forward an email marketing piece onto someone, most often than not, because the email is customized for them. It says, "Hi, Ray. Here goes this particular piece of content," and a call to action at the end of the email. That's something that's very unlikely to be forwarded along to people. Plus, no one wants to really forward along email that's promotional because of the perspective that they might be sort of forwarding along spam, even if it's not. So there's just sort of a cultural component there as well. But you're learning about the particular person by using the various mechanisms. Who are the people on Facebook that you're engaging with? Well, now in the abstract, you get to learn much more about your customer by seeing the people that are listening to you on podcasts, people that are listening to you perhaps on YouTube, the people who are listening to you on any number of other platforms, and the people who might be on social networks as well. So we really start to see a greater picture or a more clearer picture of the unifying pieces of those customers, and then we can engage with them on that universal brand message that you should be developing for your business. What's that universal thing of value that your customers are really looking for from you? And it's through multimedia, multi-channel marketing that we can really get that data down, and we can really understand it in the most full perspective, if you can call it that. Okay, so those are some benefits about multimedia, multi-channel marketing, and then I want to just kick right into the meat of this, which is let's start talking about podcasting. And there's a real sort of confusion about podcasting, so I wanted to talk about podcasting now that we're done through sort of why multimedia, multi-channel marketing, what it is, and some of the sort of criteria for being able to do that. So first and foremost, podcasting is in. The most recent statistics, we talked about this in the social media predictions for 2015 webinar, earlier this year, and what I said in that one was, this is really the year for the small business podcast. Why? Because the numbers are up. Nearly 20% of the American population is using some form of podcasting. That is, they're consuming some kind of podcasting. I think the number is around 17% now. It'll probably eke up really close to, it's probably over or near 19 or 20% by this time this year. So that's 42 million Americans are doing this. And this comes into a reality factor, which is that more people have dashboard displays that are built into their cars. They want media the way they want it, when they want it, and the type of content that they want. So they're just, sort of a me perspective, but it makes sense. You have this, digital device in your pocket at all given times, or, for me, for instance, my phone's just always in my hand. Unless I'm typing at a keyboard, my phone's always with me, and that's the case with a vast majority of Americans today. We have so many more people who are producing content, and therefore they're marketing their podcasts, video and audio, and getting that out to the world. So we're seeing this huge increase in this, and we have another beneficiary of podcasting, but also one of the people who are promoting podcasts the most, which is public radio. Public radio has been doing an amazing job of being able to, sort of get the platform noticed and out there. And so now we're seeing the sort of offshoot benefit to small business because, NPRs and the National Public Radio and PRI and all these other large public broadcasting conglomerates, they have been able to really create some excitement. The most recent one is the Serial podcast, and all of the excitement that's been around that. It's really broadened the market so much. So if you're going to do a podcast, get in on the ground level. We've been podcasting since very, very early on, and some of the research folks have been researching and tracking since about 2008, where we had about 9% of the market 9% of Americans were listening to podcasts. Here we are in 2015, and we're almost at 20%. So clearly we're doubling the number of people listening to podcasts. We'll probably do that. Well, I mean, some of the statistics say we'll triple that number in the next year. So I think that's a little bit, idealistic, but I think that we'll probably eke up above 20, maybe into a quarter of the American population, maybe a little bit more than that at the most. From my perspective, but that's still a quarter of the American population listening to podcasting, and these are affluent buyers who are listening to your content. You're literally in their ears, okay? And I always say to people, when you're thinking about podcasting, think about the fact that you're like in somebody's head. If you can get in their heart and mind through their ears, that's really a really powerful mechanism. It's a very intimate time that you have with them, and so you can really do a lot. So let's talk a little bit about podcasting. First and foremost, a lot of people ask me, well, Ray, what is a podcast? And it's a very good question because it's a very confusing mechanism for being able to create and generate a podcast to make it really easy for the consumer, okay? So let's take it back to the consumer and really figure out what they're doing, all right? So I'm a podcast listener, so of course I'm going to be a little bit more aware of podcasting, but here let's just talk about my own sort of podcast consuming, my consumption as it relates to podcasting. I have a smartphone, I have an iPod, and I have another MP3 player that's a little tiny one that I like to run with because it's separated from my phone, and I don't have to necessarily carry my phone all the time when I want to listen to podcasts. And so a podcast is actually a portmanteau of the word broadcast and the iPod, okay, the Apple iPod. So podcasting became the term that is most popularly used now, but it's really originally called netcasting, okay, for network broadcast, right? But the idea is internet. It is actually a portmanteau of internet broadcast. That is being able to broadcast content over the web, all right? And so when I want to go running, my little MP3 player on my iPod is going to come with me. It's going to go in my little armband, and it's going to have already synchronized with my account, my software on my computer, and it's going to download the podcasts that I like to listen to. Okay, and so I'm gonna suit up, get out on the road, and start running, and now I've got a customized sort of radio station, if you want to call it that, of exactly the content that I want to listen to. Okay, it's not going to be what some broadcast channel has decided that I'm going to listen to. It's not going to have commercials necessarily. Certainly not commercials between shows or those kinds of things. There's certainly now lots of podcasts do get sponsored and have commercials within them, but those are usually not as much. They're usually limited. And so I have this tool that now gives me instant consumption of very customized content. All right, that's what the consumer gets. If I get in my car, I tap on my phone pairs with my car, and I'm going to be able to listen to exactly the shows that I like to listen to when I'm driving. All right, and that might be a wide variety of things. It can be from listening to business news, things that are of great innovative perspective, like the HBR, the Harvard Business Review IdeaCast, and new professors and authors talking about innovative business concepts, to something a little more, fun-loving, for a nice drive out in the country. I might listen to something like This American Life or Science Friday from NPR. Okay, so I'm capable of deciding on what I want to listen to, not only spur of the moment, but it's exactly customized to my needs and my emotional state at the time. That's the consumer side of things. We get to decide exactly what we want to listen to, when we want to listen to it, where we want to listen to it. Because I can choose to listen to it from my smartphone, from my computer, from my car, from wherever I happen to be. All right, and we can also take it with us. So if I'm listening to Pandora or Spotify, which are internet radio stations, those require an internet connection. That means that my phone is connected to the cellular towers and is pulling down broadband internet in order to play those stations. With a podcast, I'm downloading the files directly onto my device. So if I go on the subway in New York, I go right down into the subway, I don't have a problem listening to my podcast because it's already been downloaded prior to me getting, leaving home or whenever it downloads. Okay, so the content's now on my device, and now I don't have to worry about connectivity or any of those other issues. I have the content where I need it, when I want it, and exactly what I want. All right? Really, really important for us to understand that side of things. So then we flip over to the other side, which is the business side. So what is a podcast for a business? The podcast for a business is basically a blog, okay? And that's why this is within the, basically audio, video, and photo blogging perspective. Podcasting is a blog, okay? So think about it just like a blog. You have a blog, and what do we want to do with a blog? We want to put content on it, written content for Google, and audio content for our listening audience, okay? So a lot of those components are really just like you being a radio show host. You've got to do all of those audio, production, planning out segments, and very similar to radio, we want to plan in shorter segments than longer. And so in a business perspective, you probably want those to be, between 3 and 6 minutes long, and not probably much longer than that if you're really trying to make a positive affect on your marketing bottom line. You don't want to put too much energy into it. But some people do half-hour and 60-minute long programs. There are some gaming video podcasts that have 3-hour-long videos, and these younger people watch them playing video games. Just people sitting there watching people play video games. They're some of the most lucrative, in terms of income, revenue-generating business models out there right now in the podcasting world, because they get huge amounts of money from the software game, the game and software developers, to get these listening audience, the listening audience, the viewing audience, to be interested in their particular games. So they pay these video gamers, these gamers who record themselves playing and talking and making jokes and so forth, a lot of money. So think about it from that perspective also. This is a very interesting medium. And so podcasting is actually the blog. You then put content on the blog, which is for Google, right? Because Google can't understand audio, right? So they have to look at text. So you have to still have that 300 to 600 words of requisite text. And usually those are just show notes. What's the show about? Maybe a summary of who the guest is that you have, and some things that you talked about in that particular episode. Okay, so that's easily 200 to 300 words, and then you have your audio file, and you're going to embed your audio file on that, and that's technical, and you can obviously get that done and figure out how to do that. Podcasting can be audio and video and or video, and podcasts also sometimes are PDFs, EPUB files, which are an ebook format, and then digital radio. I'm not going to talk about digital radio at all, because you'd have to have a much larger infrastructure. You'd probably have to be like NPR, have your own app and that kind of stuff in order to really podcast in digital radio format. But you can also do PDFs. Some people do that. They embed PDFs and do that, and you can actually subscribe within iTunes and other kinds of podcatchers. Podcatchers are software that consumers use in order to receive their podcast episodes, and they can do that with PDFs and EPUB files and then audio and video. Okay, so that's podcasting, and so you really want to think about how you're going to do regular content with the audio and or video in mind. Okay, and if you're not particularly comfortable with video, I would definitely say start with audio, unless the product or service you're providing really lends itself toward being video recorded. But remember, most of the podcast listening audience is not going to be able to watch the video everywhere. So say, for example, I'm sitting on the subway, I can watch the video, put it in front of me. Now, say during rush hour, I'm not going to be able to watch the video with people crammed up next to me, standing on a jammed platform or jam-packed subway car. If I'm sitting in the car driving, probably not going to be able to watch your video podcast. At least I shouldn't be watching your video podcast while I'm driving. So the most people, you're going to get the most people listening to your audio through audio format. So you primarily probably will think about podcasting from an audio perspective, but that's not to discount video blogging and video podcasting. I'll talk about that a little later. But generally when we talk about podcasting, we're talking about audio to get the greatest impact, especially in a small business environment. Okay? So think about the topic, the topics of what you would want to talk about in a podcast. Think about the reality that you can interview people, and that relates to video blogging when we get to it also. You can get a co-host. You can create a marketing alliance where you have people who are also, in your industry, but they're related businesses, not the same business. And you might want to bring them on board in order to collaborate so that you can have less work and more shows by having them join you as well. Okay, so that's podcasting. If you have any questions, by all means, I'll be happy to answer those. But that's sort of the general idea behind it. And so this brings us along to the vlogging. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about vlogging because I think that vlogging itself is something that a lot of people don't realize, that there are so many tools out there, and just like sort of get flummoxed by the idea of moving pictures. Okay, so that's what video is. Video is literally pictures being shown frame by frame really quickly, so that as few as I think 12 frames or so. I mean, I guess they can be probably slower than that, but it would seem much more silly. But like in essence, they are usually about 20 frames per second in our average modern video production. But they can be higher or lower than that based on whatever you're doing. But the idea is that you're showing an image after image after image really quickly in order to produce the video. Something that I recently saw was this amazing video done for an organization, a federal organization, and what they had done was used a PowerPoint presentation and some audio embedded within the presentation in order to be able to create they just screen recorded the PowerPoint presentation with audio. And I don't know why I hadn't really thought of it, looking all that great, but they did a fantastic job. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool video blogging concept, to be able to get the video in and on, in a video perspective with smooth transitions and all those other things. So my point in saying that is that vlogging doesn't have to be as challenging to you as basically setting up your presentation in a way that gets you, video. Okay, so you can just use a PowerPoint presentation and screen record it. So really, really simple premise with your audio on top of it, and lo and behold, you've got a video blog. Okay, so let's talk about what a video blog is. Okay, so vlogging is a video blog. Obviously, that's what I said. But the idea here is that you want to basically have a blog, right? Again, you have to write content. This is not about not writing content, text content, which Google can see, because Google can't look at a video and tell you what that particular video is. So they're gonna need you to sort of tell them what it is. So you've got to go ahead and say, okay, this is what we're talking about in this video. Give people an idea of what's going on in the video. Maybe a summation. A summary of the video. Maybe there's further explication. Maybe there was things that happened off the camera, or all of those things that you would want to do that. If you interviewed someone, you want to place maybe the bios of the people that you were interviewing, and a general idea of why you invited them on the video blog. If you were interviewing them for a particular topic, maybe what their specific expertise is in that topic and why you had them on for that episode or that particular blog entry. Okay, so video blogging also happens in and on different platforms, and I didn't mention this in the podcasting, but I'll mention this here now because this is really important. As a small business podcast or a small business vlogger, what your goal is to get people to your website, right? We talked about that at the very top, right? The idea is to get them to your website or get them on an email list so that you can further sell your product or service. Well, so YouTube, right, or Vimeo are the two, sort of major players in hosting video, where you can do that, and lots of people do that, there's great positive affect of being able to do this. But this is multimedia, multi-channel marketing, right? And what we want to make sure is that we're utilizing the tools in the most effective way in order to be able to cross-sell among those particular platforms, and also get them to a place. All right. So the multimedia, multi-channel perspective here is that video is the thing that's going to engage your audience, and it's going to bring them into your website or onto an email list so that they'll be much more likely to buy your product and buy your product hopefully now versus later, okay? But, everybody has their own, sales cycle, and so it just depends on how many times people have to be following a video blog and be impressed by your work to then, make that conversion over to the website, sales and product side of your business, and then into the funnel for purchasing purposes, okay? So the point I'm making is that there are built-out platforms where you can create a podcast on some pre-made podcasting site like a podbean.com, and I actually have a podcast on Podbean called ProdPod, and it's the productivity podcast in 2 minutes or less, so productivity lessons in 2 minutes or less. And the reality is that it's a personal podcast. I'm not trying to sell anything. Would I recommend that for a small business? Absolutely not. Your podcast should live on your website, and you should be hosting through a hosting service. But for the media, because you have to display and render a lot of broadband for audio, so you don't want to host that on your own website. But you should have all of that text and content in and on a blog tool that's gonna embed your audio so that the listener can subscribe to it in iTunes and all those other places. But you definitely want to centralize that content as close to your brand and where you have control of it as much as possible. Okay. Same thing with the video blog here. I'm not asking you to create a YouTube channel and start promoting your videos on YouTube. I'm asking you you can potentially host your video on YouTube, but I'm asking you to embed that video on your blog with your written content so that Google picks it up and says, hey, look at that, there's this video. It's not being rendered on YouTube, and this is content that people want, and so therefore they'll drive traffic to your website, which has video, which then has a call to action in it, which is going to bring them closer to the sales side of your website, to an email list, to someplace closer to sales, right? That's the multimedia, multi-channel marketing concept that I'm talking about here. So video blogging is basically creating that, primarily, video content. And one of the things that people frequently overlook when it comes to video is our webinars. Like this webinar. This webinar is basically we're basically vlogging here for the Virginia SBDC. The Virginia SBDC is going to have these webinars. They're going to be placed on their website, and now you're going to want to go back and look at the other webinars that we have. We have 50 or 60 webinars that cover various tools for small business that will be pertinent to you. Okay, so you're going to go back to the virginiaspdc.org website over and over again whenever those topics might finally pique your interest. You're like, you know what? I wonder if there's a webinar that Ray has done on X. Let me go to the Virginia SBDC website and see if there is one. Oh, look, there it is, and I'm going to watch it. You see what I mean? It's bringing people back again and again and again. Now, Virginia SBDC's mission is to be able to do this for you, so it's great that it's content there. Their job is not necessarily to convert you to do something other than to engage you with the content, but that's the idea there. Now you need to, in your videos, create those calls to action so that people come to your website and then make that next step, which is, oh, maybe I should go look at the services that this business has. Maybe I should subscribe to their email newsletter so that I can learn more about what kinds of services or products that they provide. Okay, podcasts in the video format. Vlogging is again. You're gonna embed the video on your website. It's gonna basically have its own RSS feed, and then you can syndicate that out to podcasting software like iTunes and so on and so forth, or Stitcher and so on and so forth. That can basically download that video automatically for consumers on their desktop computers, their laptops, and their mobile devices. Okay. Then finally, Google HOAs. So Google HOAs are Google Hangouts on Air. And so Google has this product. It's free, which is phenomenal. If you have a Google Apps for Work account, then it's also built into that as well. And the idea here is that you can have a sort of a audio and video-based recording mechanism where you can broadcast it to as many people as you want as possible. You can have up to 10 people in the video and audio broadcast. So just think about a television show. You can sort of do that on video. It would be like if I were on video in front of you. Let's see what just happened here. hold on one second. I'm not sure what just happened. We're going to re-click on the Present button. There we go. And so, bear with me. Right. So Google Hangouts on Air, what they do is they say, okay, you can have up to 10 people. You can do panel discussions. You can do product demos, just you on and do product demos. You can do Q&A with your potential customers and your audience, and all of that other fun stuff. It's a fantastic, cool platform and product. Go beyond that, though, and then what you can do is Google HOAs allow you to automatically record the interactions that you're having. So it automatically records it. It pushes it out to your YouTube channel. Great, fine, on the YouTube side. What I care about then is then you can take that video and embed it on your own website, and you can have a series of, instead of a normal FAQ section, you can create blog entries that are tagged FAQ, and then, once a month, once, every 2 weeks or whatever it is, you host one of these particular HOAs, and now you have a series of ongoing Q&As. They can be a couple minutes, they can be 15 minutes, they can be an hour, whatever they are. But it's such an interactive format, and so there's less needed for you to create scripted content because you're working directly one-on-one with your audience, and it can be a really, really fun time where you have panelists on. It's just a really, really great tool. And what I really mean is that it can create video. I mean, it's just an option for being able to create more video. And so the final sort of component of vlogging here that I wanted to talk about today, and sort of its importance without getting into too many of the technical details. But the importance is being able to affect motion and emotion in a video. Okay, so we know that if somebody was standing motionless and there was audio playing, that would be obtuse. We need to have motion that conveys the story, and we have to have emotion that makes us feel, right? And that is your audience, either your potential customers, your clients, whoever you're trying to affect. So you really need to make sure that when you're planning out vlogging, that whatever you're trying to video blog about, that it actually conveys emotion with motion. Okay? So if you're just going to sit there static and look at the camera, you might just want to do a podcast. But if you're going to actually demonstrate something or show something, then I think that would be actually quite useful. Many times I see these vloggers that are out there that are very funny. I mean, if you can be entertaining and interesting with just you on camera, go for it. And that's great. If you're uncomfortable in front of the camera, but you still think that you can do something like that, maybe it's something like this, where you have a PowerPoint presentation open in front of you, and you're recording audio over it. It's exactly what we're doing here today. Again, there's no motion necessarily, just the changes of the slide, but I'm the one who's supposed to be creating the emotional resonance with you, my voice and the content and substance of what I'm saying. And hopefully it's interesting and it's entertaining in some way, shape, or form. So you have to basically make sure that you find that happy balance between the motion and emotion components of it. And this particular content that I'm providing fits having, slides and so forth, so that you're still in that perspective of being able to understand the content and be interested in it, versus perhaps your business where you may not want to have that kind of content be so static as the content flows through. Okay, so just pay attention to motion and emotion. Next up is sort of the most difficult of the formats, and so I decided to leave the most challenging for last, which is the photo blog. Okay, the photo blog is really for a business that has that kind of infrastructure. Okay, and so if you are a photographer, if you're in the visual and creative fields, and not someone who does video creatively, professionally, photo blogging can be a really, really powerful medium. What they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, they certainly aren't worth 1,000 words to Google. You still have to write. Remember, we're still blogging. We're just adding, multimedia to the blog. So in this particular case, we want the photo and the photos to be able to tell the, to be able to blog with. Okay, so they're the content, even though we have to give Google their requisite, 300 words so that it knows what this content is about. Okay? And there are different things that we want to do with photos. We want to make sure that they have alt text and that they're named properly for search engine optimization purposes. Okay? So that means the name of the file of the photo needs to be what it is. Okay? It can't be, image underscore 2052.jpg. It needs to be, Raymond sitting at his desk working.jpg. Okay? Google looks at that file name to figure out what it is and why you put it on that particular page. And then alt text is a type of accessibility option that we add to websites. And you normally can see them when you hover your mouse over an image. If text shows up, that's alt text, ALT, for alternative text. Okay? Now, alt text is usually used by screen readers for the visually impaired. But Google knows that when you go ahead and look at that text and it's descriptive of what's going on. So I'm not sure whether I'm still being heard. Am I still being heard, Tracy?
Yes, Ray, you are. At least
Okay,
I can hear
wonderful.
you.
All right, I was just like, there was a weird beep on the line. I was like, uh-oh, something's going wrong.
Nope, we can hear you.
Good. Like, if all of a sudden I can't be heard, folks, you just let me know. All right, so the other side is alternative text. And alternative text is, alt text is just a little bit of code that you or your web developer can easily apply to images. And you'll see that you hover over an image on any website. If text appears, then it's, of course, alt text. It's basically enabled. And that description is used by Google to be able to tell what that image is. It looks at the file name, it looks at the alt text, it looks at the text on the website page that it's embedded on, and it says, oh, look at that, this image is about this thing, and it tells us that by these 3 pieces of information. Great, now we can push that up in the algorithm because it's more relevant to people's intent to find the content. All right? So what we want to make sure we do is that we want to make that enabled, and the great part about that is that you're also expanding your reach, because there are many people who have visual impairments, and I'm not just talking about someone who might actually be fully blind. I'm talking about people who have various levels of color blindness and other kinds of visual impairments where they may not be able to visualize images the way in which other people can. And so screen readers are very, very important to them, and being able to describe things that might not be high contrast for them, especially with text on images and things of that nature. So you can really make a happy website visitor by making sure that your images are accessible, in that way. All right. So lots of information online about web accessibility and making images accessible. So just think about that as you're photo blogging. So that's the idea of photo blogging. Let me give you some ideas. When you see this image, which is a beautiful little dessert thing that I had recently, you can see that it conveys a particular emotion. Maybe you're looking at it and you're like, oh, you know what, that coffee looks really delightful, and you start to salivate over the idea of coffee ice cream now, or you're looking at the little creme brulee item on the far right and you're like, ooh, that would be really, really lovely to have a little creme brulee at the moment. Well, that's sort of what you're trying to do in and on blogging. You're really trying to convey a story about something, but you're really trying to help your audience emote, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the image, and I want you to start to think about what was the story. I've already told you that I went and had this, the other evening. But I want you to think about what's the story? What other images could I have applied here? I could have shown you a series of images, obviously, but I just didn't have the space on the screen, or the images from the evening, so it didn't really matter. But the idea here is that, this picture tells part of a story. And what you want are the other pictures. You want to see when I showed up at the restaurant, who I was with, the friends that I was with, and what we talked about. Maybe we can show that in demonstrating the cocktails we had waiting for the table. Maybe we could have taken pictures of the dinner itself. We could have taken pictures of ourselves together eating the shared dessert. Okay? The photos could represent an entire story, and this one photo only represents one aspect of the story, one moment in the story. But it speaks volumes, right? Because it for me, represents an entire evening. But it doesn't to your audience. Your audience needs more. It needs to be able to see everything in a photo blog. It needs to see the different pieces of the story put together. And that makes my first point, which is that the photos tell the story in a photo blog, okay? And so that's the primary content, even though we need to put captions and other content in there, primarily for Google, but for the human element of this, the human is looking at your blog, and they're consuming it based on the photos, okay? Now, a common misconception about photo blogging is that it's only a blog with a bunch of photos. You're photo blogging if you're posting pictures on Twitter or posting on Instagram or any of those other places. Now, I'm not saying not to do those, because Instagram drives a lot of traffic to businesses. However, I do want you to think more about photo blogging on your own blog, again, on your own website or on your own blog platform, than on someone else's social media platform, okay? The same reason applies for podcasting or video blogging or photo blogging here. We want to bring people into a controlled environment where our business brand is face forward. If you photo blog on Facebook, you're advertising for Facebook, okay, first. Then you're advertising and bringing traffic for your own business. Why be second to Facebook or second to Pinterest or second to Instagram or second to X or Y new social media platform? We want to really be front and center. When someone Googles something, they find a photo, they should be taken to our website where we control the brand, and they get that experience from the beginning to completion, fulfillment, and delivery of their product or service. We really need to think about that as we tell these stories, but also in the framing of the brand. Okay, so really pay attention to that as you move forward. Next up is you want to engage your customers. All right, so you want to make sure that you want to engage your customers' imaginations, which means that you want to give content, you want to tell them more, right, which is multiple photos, but you don't want to have a frame by frame of my eating the dessert, for instance, right? At that point, you might as well just do video. So it's that happy medium behind showing enough photographs to really take us through and engage my imagination about how to use your product, how to engage with your product, how your product might be shown or that kind of thing, or how your service applies to me, but not every photo, so that it's basically could have been just done in video. And what I typically tell people is sort of think about National Geographic. Nat Geo does this amazing job of taking photographs. And I'm not talking about the quality and the beauty of their photographs, but the fact of the matter is that the photos tell the stories in Nat Geo. You know, Nat Geo has like tons of articles, and they're very involved, writing pieces. And I respect them for that journalism. But I open up Nat Geo because of their pictures and the stories they tell. And that is the average American. We open up Nat Geo and we leaf through it for the pictures to tell us the stories, And likewise with sort of Time Magazine, people don't typically read Time Magazine articles from soup to nuts. They open them because of the picture on the front cover and the story that the pictures are going to tell. So think about it from that perspective. You're really trying to do photojournalism when you're doing blogging. Okay. Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. I want to move into, in our last segment here, the concepts of really getting started. Okay, so one, I want to say that as I said before, and I'm repeating myself because this is really important. I really want you to think about this as creating a blog on your own website and then incorporating multimedia on it, and then being able to get people from the multimedia content on your blog to the sales side of your business, where you're trying to show them product or service information, getting them onto an email list so that you then can start the marketing funnel closer toward the sales, or picking up the phone and having them call you from a video or from a photo post or from a podcast episode, and really thinking about this from the multimedia, multi-channel perspective, less than that. Now, you can also do this by extending that to Twitter, where you post video like Vine or other short videos from YouTube, using photographs in and on Instagram, and video now on Instagram and other networks, and leading people then to your blog, which may have just written content, and then having a call to action within the blog to an email or the web sales, product and service side of the business. So again, it's all about leading them through and down into the narrower sections of your sales funnel to weed out the people who aren't going to buy. All right. So we want to engage them and pull them in, but then we want to get the people who are really going to be buying to move along the sales funnel closer toward us. All right. So that's the real goal here. So just first and foremost, like any good chess game, we have to really write down a plan. Okay. When you sit down, to play chess the first time, you've got to learn the instructions, and the best way to do that is to read the instructions, like any game, right? Unless you have my brother, and then you have to play his rules in chess. But his rules in chess always led to him winning, but that's a whole other ball game. But you really need to write down a plan, okay? You need to know when you're going to be posting, especially the multimedia content, and that means looking at your sales cycle, looking at your sales and revenue reports. Or, you don't want to be posting content when you know that you're not going to be making sales. So you want to go ahead and think about the content to drive up sales in a particular time frame. Look at your reports from your accounting software. If you have high revenue in a particular month, well, when do customers start to think about buying from you? Well, back it up to that point and start putting out and pumping out multimedia content there so that you become top of mind and then come closer to it. So your schedule should reflect when customers are thinking about buying, straight through the point of sale, when they do buy, when you're seeing an uptick in your sales, but you should really be thinking about it from that perspective. That whole time frame, you need to be posting that kind of content to start them down the sales funnel. Next up, you need to think about which media and which channels. Okay, so I noted some of them. If you're trying to really engage people in this perspective, you might start out with Instagram or Pinterest from a photo perspective. You might lead them to your blog, which may have video on it, and then leading them to a call to action, which may lead them to email or another kind of content for them to be able to have engagement with you. Okay, so you have to think, okay, well, how would this work, and is my audience there? So if your audience are 45-year-old males with upper 75-plus incomes, guess what? They're not on Pinterest. So starting your whole multimedia, multi-channel marketing strategy on Pinterest is pretty foolish, unless you're trying to reach their wives. And then that's exactly where you should start. Okay? If you're trying to reach a younger crowd, under 24, and a highly engaged social media youth, attack Instagram, and that's going to be your first place to engage them and lead them out of Instagram and toward your website and blog. Okay, so think about where your audience is. Figure out what media is going to be most appropriate for them. Remember, the most engaging media starts at video, then it moves to photos, then it moves to audio, and so on and so forth. But practicality really makes a difference. I'm a podcast listener because I like running, and when I'm driving, I can't watch video. So, there are a lot of people out there, and there's clearly 42 million Americans out there who really are like me in the sense of listening to audio-only podcasts and really enjoying it from that perspective. Okay, so think about what media and what channels. Next up, we really want to track and test one campaign, okay, and usually one campaign at a time. You really can't do multimedia, multi-channel marketing with multiple campaigns at once unless you have a very large staff and you're capable of tracking a huge amount of data, doing not only the collection but then the analysis and synthesis in a good way. So I really recommend that you test one campaign. All right. Now, if you've done no multimedia marketing before, you should really take a step back and go to your plan and really try one media, one medium at a time, and sort of build an understanding of the ins and outs of the culture and the people who are coming to you and that kind of thing. So this is really about what if you're already engaging in and on the blog and that kind of thing, then you start to think about the multimedia, multi-channel marketing strategy. But really, until you've started to market in one channel well with multimedia, you shouldn't really start to just try to throw it all together into one campaign and think that you're going to be successful out the gate. Now, some of you might have the energy, the perseverance to make that happen, but most people will feel the failure very early on and the stress of all of that and quit. So I would suggest that you start with one multimedia, one type of media. That might just be, let's just get the podcast up and running, right? That kind of thing. Let's get it on a schedule, get consistent content, get some good guests, and really get ourselves going before you get out there. I always recommend that your schedule always lag by about 8 to 10 weeks. So you're writing and scheduling content, unless you have something that's a very timely, industry or vertical, where your content needs to come out the next day, where you're doing live content or near live content and getting it out there, or you're doing something like Blog Talk Radio, where it's a live, show. Really, you can be 8 to 10 weeks, and it's close enough to the calendar that it's not too far ahead. It's only really 2 months, 2.5 months or so. Difference, but it's still so it's timely, but it's not too far away that you can't change things. Okay, and know what's going to be coming up and that kind of thing. But it's enough time that you have some leeway. Kids soccer practice, you get a head cold and you just don't feel like recording your voice or face with you feeling like your red nose is all red and you're feeling like feeling terrible. So give yourself some time there to plan and execute. So you definitely need that 8 to 10 weeks to be able to build up content. And then when 8 to 10 weeks comes around, you publish your first piece of content, but you don't stop producing. I know a lot of people who go out there and they say, okay, Ray, I got my 8 to 10 weeks of video blogs ready. I'm all set to go. And then in week 9, once they've launched, they stopped recording. They stopped writing scripts. They stopped interviewing people. And so come week 20, they're like, oh yeah, the blog has been fallow for a couple of weeks because we stopped writing and recording. And it's like, well, you have to keep doing it. That's part of the consistency part, So really make sure that you stay consistent by going ahead and continuing to post content and writing content, even if you have this sort of repository or bank of timeless content that you can be producing and sending out there. So keep it timely. And make sure that you're paying attention to the schedule that you've set for yourself. Really try one campaign at a time, and I think you'll be pretty successful in getting yourself out there and making affect in that sort of multimedia, multi-marketing strategy perspective. So I think we're coming up on time, and so I want to just leave a little bit of time for questions. I'll turn it over to Tracy and be happy to answer any other questions that you might have. And then we'll close out.
Okay. Well, Ray, you do have one posted, which is, what are a few of the best podcasting platforms to use?
Sure. So for hosting a podcast, it would be using whatever blog you're currently using. So if you have a self-hosted WordPress blog, or you have a WordPress.com blog where you've actually aliased it to your own domain, so it's blog dot or podcast.yourbusiness.com. That would be a suggestion, or you could create, and really any web hosting service you can pretty much create a blog on. If you're doing this, once you have the web hosting side done, then you really have to think about podcast audio or media hosting. If you're media hosting audio, the biggest podcast hosting service is one called Libsyn, Libsyn.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that. And so, that's sort of the largest one out there. There are other media hosts, Blueberry.com, BLUBRRY.com. Basically, take out the E's in Blueberry.com. And they actually have an amazing WordPress plugin called PowerPress. And it's pretty much the industry standard for self-hosted WordPress podcasts, video or audio. And Blueberry is also a video hosting service, so they can do video and audio. And so really, those are the two major audio and video media hosting accounts. So remember, there's two parts to that. If you're doing any multimedia audio or video, you have to have your website blog host and your media host. Those two components are very necessary.
Great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, and we've come up on the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and close things out. Thanks, everyone, for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded, and it'll be posted in the Virginia SBDC website under live recordings, webinars, and recordings. Tomorrow, you'll be receiving a follow-up email on the webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in the email. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. See you on April 16th for the Power of Google Apps for Work. Thanks, everyone.